Happy to start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Frattini, and tonight I would like to talk to you, um, tell you a little bit more about what I'm doing around code reviews and automating code reviews in the Salesforce space. Um, so hopefully this topic is interesting. One, I am not planning to take too much of your time. I've got a short presentation just to set the context, and I'd like to give you a quick demo also of the technology that I'm developing. Um, so a little bit about myself before we start. Um, as I said again, my name is Lorenzo Frattini. I'm Italian. As you can see in the picture, I don't look great in pictures. That's why I'm hiding far, far away tonight. I'm a Salesforce certified technical architect. So to give you a little bit of my background, I've been working most of my career in professional services. I've got a little bit of product development background, but I am mostly I've been doing Salesforce mostly in professional services organizations, so helping other companies building their orgs, building their products, um, and in this kind of space, my kind of professional focus is pretty much um, pretty much around Agile and DevOps. I am a kind of guy that is normally very keen to implement Agile in the most in a kind of a effective way. I'm a big Scrum fanboy and DevOps oriented. That's just a little buzzword to say that I like putting automation in place. I am based in London, UK, and I am also the creator of Clayton.io, which is a cloud-based code review app that I love to talk to you about tonight. Um, since I'm not there in person and I don't have much feedback loop, I cannot see you guys in the room. I probably won't be able to hear your questions if you speak out loud. So please feel free to reach out on Twitter. I keep my Twitter account open. So in case you've got questions, or please feel free to use this channel. Um, any questions so far, or before we start? So, as I said, my everyday job is as a technical architect. I am mostly involved on kind of key complex project or um, in complex implementations, normally multiple streams of work, um, normally a certain degree of complexity solution-wise, and multiple developers. That is always quite always what happens. And as a technical architect, when I am involved, especially on a project that maybe is not going so well, maybe as it start already and it's not going great, maybe there is a problem somewhere. Um, usually my number one thing that I will do as soon as I join a project, like my day one, something that I will make sure I get done by day one every time I join a project, is normally putting in place code reviews. And the reason why I always do this is because code reviews is something that is very, very simple in principle, is has a kind of a very manageable overhead, but has a number of benefits for the health of an, an implementation. So anything you're doing, doesn't matter if it's a product, doesn't matter if it's a customization of an org. It's normally very, very, in my experience at least, always a very effective thing to do is to put in place a code review. And what I mean by that is um, a simple process in which we make sure that every time some piece of Apex is developed, some Visualforce is developed, there is always, as part of the process, a moment in which gets peer reviewed by someone else. I am assuming everyone pretty much is familiar with this uh, process, what a code review looks like or what it is. But please feel free to stop me if you feel that I should um, tell a little bit more about this, but I'm assuming that you guys already know what I'm talking about. You're familiar with these kind of things. So, sorry. So why code reviews are so such a good thing? In my experience, they are absolutely fantastic and fundamental. And the reason I try to summarize them here, one very good thing is that they enforce standards. So enforcing standards is not just about is nothing that relates to kind of taking away creativity from developers. I I always value a lot. I'm a developer myself. I always value a lot like individual contributions and the style everyone has. I think is a richness. There is a there is a fundamental um, there is a fundamental aspect to bear in mind, which is around how maintainable the code will be further down the line. So even though I am a consultant, I'm normally paid by the hour, and I could say that I shouldn't care much about the legacy that myself and my team will leave behind. The reality is that I pretty much care, and I want to make sure that every client I work with or I work for is not just working software, but has also a good legacy, a software that is doesn't create that is maintainable and can be extended in the future in a fairly good way and in a fairly easy way. And standards and having good standards is a good way to achieve that. Code reviews make your code better because you've got someone else looking at the code, someone else that can flag any issue, any design issue, any best practice that you are not following. Um, it allows to perform an early issue detection. So although quality assurance is made of a number of things, and there is also unit testing that should catch any problem at development time, the reality is that there is a wide variety of things that could go wrong in someone's code. So code reviews help in detecting some type of problems, and they are normally those problems that are not problems that will make your code not compile, but are those problems that will probably not manifest themselves immediately, because the code that you're likely to submit to a code reviews is code that works, maybe works on one record or two, maybe has got some basic unit test coverage, but might, for example, be in breach of a best practice. Might have an hard-coded ID, for example, that is not something that you detect either, depending on your unit tests. Of course, if they're good, you can detect it, but normally it's not detected by unit tests. Normally it's not detected by a compiler error of some sort. Code reviews are very simple but very powerful, and also a thing that I always that is not often mentioned, but I truly believe is one of the biggest value of a code review, is that they slowly erode your technical debt. So assuming that, well, what I mean by technical debt is basically pretty much everything you built up in the history of the project that requires to be fixed at some point. If you have your technical debt quantified in a way, let's say that you have number of lines with problems as an indicator, the good thing about code reviews is that you make sure that you're not fixing the history of the project, but from the day you put code reviews in place, you slowly make sure that every new increment is better than the rest. And by doing that, what you're doing in the long term is slowly eroding that technical debt. You might not fix it entirely, but you make sure that every new thing is better than what you had behind, which in my mind is a very powerful, in my opinion, is a very powerful concept. And another thing that is always very, very important is that promotes a culture in which code quality matters. So if you do code reviews and you do it regularly with your team will end up talking about good code, having an idea of good code versus bad code. So just by doing this, you promote an environment where that is something you talk about, that is something you start caring about. So how do I do code reviews? Normally, I do use a checklist. So I do have a checklist in the linked in this description. To me, a checklist is a code review checklist shouldn't be too long. It's basically a set of criteria that are testable, very simple and quick to verify on your code. You might have criteria like make sure there is no hard-coded ID, make sure that every variable has a meaningful name, things like that. If you're interested in the details, you can have a look at what is shared in this link. But in principle, you have a checklist. Someone in your team has developed a new functionality. My assumption here is that we are using some sort of version control system like GitHub, for example. This is a kind of a fundamental assumption that that I'm making at this point. And the reason is I'm using version control and Git itself to enable the code review process. So let's assume that you have a checklist, you've got version control system in place. The way I would normally work on a project would be any developer would build a new feature on a branch, on a Git branch. At some point, we'll do a pull request, and the pull request itself is where the code review can happen, and comments can be made by any member of the team or by the reviewer directly on the diff. So this is what I've been doing for years on my projects. It's a very simple approach, but also very powerful. You've got tools like GitHub will show you what the diff of the pull request is. So basically only what has changed, so that you can focus your review only on the new stuff, only on the change stuff. So this is a very straightforward approach. I would do it on every project. I would recommend anyone to implement this kind of process everywhere they are, everything they're doing. I think it's also quite agnostic to the technology you're using for developing. Is even more important in the Salesforce space, because we know that there are a number of best practices that are that can slip through. You can still write code with some that compiles and technically works, but with some very big problems that are that can be actually still in your Apex code, for example. You can introduce security issues, you can introduce hard-coded IDs or things like that. And you want to make sure that this doesn't happen, right? So as I mentioned, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and quite often on a number of different projects in parallel. So when you know, I'm the kind of person that when starts doing the same thing over and over and over and looks for the same mistakes over and over and do this every day, day in and day out, I always start thinking, okay, how can I automate this? How can we make this faster and more scalable? How can I try to take this problem away so that the review we're having is at least either shorter or more meaningful. And so I started working at this idea of what I later called Clayton. Clayton is, in a nutshell, a web app that connects into your any version control, not any version control system. It works with GitHub and Bitbucket so far, and the idea is that you would act as a gatekeeper to block bad code from slipping into your repository. So it's based on the same Git workflow that we just mentioned. The idea is that the tool will automatically detect some of the problems without any human being necessarily involved. The tool is cloud-based. It runs on a Roku, actually, so there is nothing that anyone has to install. I will show you how it works so you'll see it yourselves, but basically The idea is that you go in, you set your own standards, your own code review standards, and then a code review by Clayton is triggered every time there is a new pull request that is created or updated by any developer in the team. And the tool will give you a pass or fail result of the code review that normally happens in a few seconds. And the tool will also leave inline comments on the diff like a human would do. So this is the basic idea, this is the basic concept. I started developing it last year. I, for the first time, presented this at Dreamforce last year. So let me give you a quick demo of Clayton, what it does. So hopefully the app will function. Of course, there is always that thrill when you make a live demo. So in this, the app is on www.clayton.io. I also prepared on my GitHub account a demo repo. This is nothing special. I think it might be some code that I Apex code that I wrote a while ago. I've got a bunch of controllers, a bunch of pages. It's just to give an example. It's basically some code. So what I'm going to do is I will log into Clayton. And I will connect a new repository. That's how it works. Remember, it acts as a gatekeeper on a repo, so it has to be linked on a repo. So this is my Clayton demo repo that I just mentioned. What I will do is I will add it to Clayton. What it means is that the tool will automatically create a webhook somewhere in here. The webhook makes sure that every new change is notified to Clayton itself. So Clayton has now a new Clayton demo project. It runs also a first scan of the code, so it does a first code analysis. In this case, it identified a bunch of problems. There is, for example, it detected a first class that has became quite large, so it's quite difficult to maintain. There is a class that is not using with sharing. Okay, that was a tricky one because, you know, inner classes don't necessarily inherit that from outer classes. That is a tricky one. But so basically there is a first analysis with some of the issues automatically being detected. And now what I will try to do is I will simulate what happens when a developer maybe makes a change or creates a new feature. So so let me just create what I call a feature branch. Let's assume that I have a new feature. I will now make some changes to my code. Let's make some mistakes, things that I shouldn't be doing. So for example, we could do something like this. I could do something like something very bad like this. So introducing a couple of mistakes, of programming mistakes, basically. Now I am not testing this on Salesforce just to make the demo quicker, but I think you're getting where the kind of scenario, right? So I'm making some changes. Let's assume that I tested them locally. I'm happy with them, and now I want to submit them. So as a developer, what I will do is I will commit my change. So my new feature, let's say that my feature is now ready to be shipped. Of course, in this case, it just changed an existing file, but it could be anything, right? I could have created 3 new classes, 2 new pages. So I will now push this on my repo. Hopefully everything works. And now, as I mentioned earlier, the code review moment is normally something that I do at pull request time. So as a developer, I am now creating a new pull request with my new feature, and this is basically the point in time where normally I would have another human looking at my code. So normally other people, other developers in the project will get an email, things like that. What should happen here is that okay, so let me make sure that these messages oops, sorry. So it looks like my it's my code review hasn't been triggered. Oh, that's huh. I knew I should have done it live.
Because
let me. Sorry?
Because it's a live demo.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is embarrassing. I've got a backup. I prepared like uh, a small backup just to show you the same thing. Uh, I'll look at what it is. Probably is just a stupid detail, but basically, it should be able to see. Um, in this example, I'm using Bitbucket, but it's exactly the same thing. Um, I am doing a pull request on Bitbucket. I will sort out the demos straight after. Um, I'm doing exactly the same thing on Bitbucket, creating the pull request. And what happens here is that what you get immediately is that the webhook is sent with a message that is basically asking the web app to perform this review, and the app will come back with inline comments on the lines that have some issues. So in this case, in this example, I had introduced an empty method, a class with sharing, some uh, violation of best practices. Apologies for the broken demo. I will fix it straight after. I'll try to figure out what that is. But basically, the product works is once you've got your project configured, you get some configurability, right? And the idea is that you've got a number of what I would normally do manually, creating a code review checklist, is something that you can do also on Clayton itself. So you can come in and decide what kind of rules you want to apply, what makes an acceptable code from your point of view, and there are things like you don't need to have, you cannot have DML statement in loops or Salesforce IDs. Triggers must not contain any logic. These are all kind of best practices in Apex that you're probably everyone is familiar with. There are also some security rules So for example, you can make sure that constructor will not contain DML statements. And you can also go down to the style level, for example, enforcing the naming convention for classes and triggers. These rules are off by default because that's really up to every team. Sometimes this is felt to be too much for teams, but if you want to standardize also that level, how you name things, you got the option to do that. So for example, you can enforce naming convention. You can change also the naming convention pattern that you want to use. So for example, let's assume that for your test methods, you want to use this naming convention where you have underscores. So this is just to give you a couple of examples. These rules, there are some rules around complexity. So for example, you can say never allow people to nest more than 7 ifs, because nesting many ifs is normally making the code less readable and more error prone. So code that is, as a rule of thumb, when things are nested beyond a certain level, that is an indicator that that code will require to be refactored. So if you want, you can block these things, or you can tell the tool actually reject any code, reject any piece of code with that problem, or actually just a warning. So leave a comment, but don't make the code review fail for that. So as you can see, there are a number of rules, and once you get an analysis done, in this case, I don't know why any analysis wasn't triggered, but you would get for every analysis an entry here, and you will be able to see what the problem is. This is a breakdown of the history of the issues that has been found. So this is the most frequent issue: classes don't use with sharing. And this is, of course, very, very convenient in my experience, because when you've got a large team, you might want to be able to figure out quickly what is the most common problem, so that you can address it in a retrospective, or you might want to have organize some extra training to make sure your team addresses that problem as a group. So and also further down here, there are some insights. In this example, I am the only team member, but if I had multiple developers, this will keep track of everyone's number of lines contributed and the average defect density. So that is basically how many lines are created with defects in your history of contributions. Okay, so that is it. I think that's it for the demo. I'll try to fix it straight after. Sorry about that problem. Maybe let me try once more to make a small change here. So if this doesn't work, I'll just ignore it. Okay, now the tool has been triggered. Okay, as you can see here, okay, this time it worked. So there is an X saying that the code review hasn't passed, and there are 3 comments. These are generated by the tool. So the tool, as you see, is living on my behalf in this case, because I'm the user that created the connection, but basically is leaving a comment with the problem on the line that is offending, right? So in this case, I introduce an update within a for loop, and the tool is telling me I shouldn't do this. It's telling the developer you shouldn't do this. The same here, and also there was a with sharing clause that I removed, and because I'm using a rule that is enforcing that, I'm getting a comment here. So as you can see now, As soon as the code is being developed, I already have the feedback. And at this point in time, it's just the automation that has taken care of this. The developer at this point could sort out the easy stuff and maybe have a second, more accurate, more detailed code review around, not around how we name things or around these trivial errors, but maybe around something more meaningful, like the way the code has been designed, for example, or the design patterns that have been used. So this is just an example of what I meant when I said that I wanted to automate as much as possible out of the code reviews. So some results about Clayton. Clayton was first introduced at Dreamforce. Is now a tool that is available to the public. I have so far, Clayton has so far reviewed 27 million lines of code, and there is the first very good, very rewarding evidence around the fact that it's actually working. What you see on the right is the defect density trend of an actual project. Is 50,000 lines of Apex, roughly, and is a project that is being developed by 20 active developers. It's an App Exchange product. They perform, in average, 10 pull requests per day, chunky ones. And as you can see, this is the trend of what I call the defect density. So how many lines, considering your entire amount of code, how many lines have problem. They started from 7%, and by having this code review, automated code review at each point for every pull request day in, day out, they make sure that every new piece of code that is added is better, and they are slowly eroding this technical debt. They are now around the 1% average. So by fixing increments, they fix pretty much the whole product. Yeah, some features, just in case you're curious, it now works with GitHub and Bitbucket. It detects and reviews Apex code. It supports teams, so you can have multiple teams. You can have your entire team on it, and the tool will keep track of contributions and how, in a kind of a gamified way, what's the defect density of each team member. I've got a few things on the roadmap in case you're interested. Adding Visual Force and Lightning support, introducing a layer of dynamic code analysis. I can talk you through these details if you're interested, but this is just to give you, a kind of a quick snapshot of things that are there and things that are not there yet. Okay, that's it. That's really what I wanted to cover. I wanted to give you a quick demo, hopefully get some of you excited about what I'm doing. In case you're interested, please reach out on Twitter. Go and try Clayton yourselves. I haven't mentioned that Clayton follows a model that is similar to that of GitHub. So if you have an open source project, some Apex code, you want to give it a shot, just go and create an account. It doesn't cost anything. You can add your open source projects and have code analysis on them for free. But this is, for me, this is what I'm trying to do now. I mean, I am focusing on this product. Is of course something that I regard as my little baby, so I care about it, and I'm trying to focus on this even more. And so if you're interested in this, you want to try it with your team, or you think this might be a valuable addition to your DevOps stack, please feel free to get in touch. I am super eager to get more users on it, to get feedback and suggestions by great developers, great teams. So please just get in touch and let's do this. Okay, that is my presentation. So if you have any questions, or I'm more than happy to answer.
All right, thank you. I can relay the questions up front, or you can come up front to the microphone if anyone has any questions. Okay, I have one to start. So just to clarify, Clayton is free for open source projects, but if you want to use it for your private repos, there's a cost associated with it.
Yeah, that's correct. So there is a pricing page that describes that. Honestly, I'm still working out the details of the pricing model, but that is what you said is correct. There is currently kind of a cap at 5 projects, just because it's a way for me to kind of keep under control the size of the Heroku servers that I need. But yes, what you said is correct.
Okay. Any others? No. All right. Looks like the room is speechless.
Oh, okay. Hopefully this was interesting. I don't have any feedback. I cannot see any faces. So I hope you weren't bored.
Yeah, they're still awake. Some smiles. So.
Okay. Okay, cool. Uh, if is there any comments, anything that maybe any suggestions or any feedback on what you guys saw, apart of the fact that the demo was broken at some point? I apologize for that. But
I
anyone?
thought it was great. I do these code reviews all the time, so the idea of an automated code review sounds pretty awesome.
Okay, thanks. So I'm really as I want to make sure I communicate. This tool is really at the beginning, is in its infancy, is being used. I've got some kind of a decent size organization using it, so I'm kind of validated the first stage. I think the tool works, is solid enough, but of course, it's still a kind of an early product, is not where near the kind of functionality where I would like it to be. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully be in touch so that you can follow the product as it grows and join me in this journey. I'm absolutely excited about this. The idea of automating things is something that always makes me uh, super excited about the possibilities. So yeah, if you're interested, if you're into this stuff, please reach out.
All right. Well, are you up for the day now, or are you going to go back to sleep?
Good question. I don't know. I think I'll decide. I'll decide in the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
Still very dark outside, so I guess I go back to sleep at some point. Yes. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you guys for
We'll let you
having
get
me.
to sleep, Lorenzo. Thank you so much for getting up at this hour.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone in the room for paying attention and listening to this. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.